What is up, fellas? Welcome to another episode of Rewriting History with me, the Goob. Um, this week, I almost made another response video to Night Scarab's most recent Vase video, and I realized that I need to take my own advice. I preach on this channel about how people need to divest from the mainstream and stop wasting time arguing with people who aren't interested in having honest conversations. And while I was working on that response video, I realized that was exactly what I was doing myself. So I'm not going to waste any more time addressing his blatant propaganda because that's what it is. It's just silly nonsense. But he does manage to bring up some good information in his video yet again. So we are going to talk about his video a little bit and talk about some of the other recent Vase scan analysis that's been done. There's some pretty interesting information out there, and it's still in the beginning stages. You know, a lot more information still needs to come forward, but we're starting to get some interesting stuff. So let's set my screen here. There we go. We'll go with that one. And yeah, let's go ahead and take a look at some of the interesting things that Night Scarab actually does present in his video. This is a modern souvenir from Egypt. The source is Trust Me Bro, but allegedly this is a handmade stone vase from Egypt. And here, let's take a look at the scan here. So this whole scale is 1/10 of an inch, half of 1/10 of an inch, half of 1/10 of an inch, the whole thing being 1/10 of an inch. So I just wanted to give you a look at this vase here. As he says, the scale changes. So the scale that's been used for the pre-dynastic vases and what's going to be used going forward is just this divided by 10. So, you know, this is a lot less accurate than the pre-dynastic vases that we'll be taking a look at, but this is allegedly a handmade vase from modern day Egypt today. Just to give you an idea of the levels of precision here, you know, you're within 1/10 of an inch for this vase. This is a modern granite vase with some interesting wear patterns on it. So again, you know, half of a thousandth, half of a thousandth, 1/1000th between the red and the blue. And as we look at this rotate, you'll see patches, alternating patches of high and low spots. And it's rather interesting. So those patterns right there, we're going to be taking a look at a lot of wear patterns and discussing what they all mean. But those patterns right there just come from a wobble in the rotation axis itself. So as it's rotating, it's wobbling back and forth a bit. And so you end up with a slightly ovular shape, essentially. You end up with some high patches on opposite sides and some low patches on opposite sides. Pretty normal wear pattern there. Nothing unexpected. Let's see, I think I'm on to the next already. This is a second modern granite vase. It doesn't have the same wobble. So this was turned on a different machine, or, you know, the machine after it was calibrated likely. You still see the same levels of deviation, about 1/1000th of an inch, but it's a little more even, a little less patchy. And then here we have an agate jar. Agate is pretty hard, like granite, although a little more consistent in its hardness, I do believe. But this was made in the 1970s on a lathe in the 1970s. So this is giving an idea of that level of precision. Pretty good again. Okay. And now we're getting into Bison Hill Stonecrafts. He's a YouTuber and a stone crafter. I don't think he's really a mason necessarily, because he's more crafts. But this is one of his shot glasses that was made out of, I think this one was granite. I think there's two granite and one obsidian, or maybe vice versa. But yeah, and it looks very similar to, the scans that we see of the dynastic vases. Again, you do see a bit of a wobble in, the rotational axis here. So you've got a high patch and a low patch that alternates around the bottom here, right? And then we move on to his next granite. This is another granite shot glass made by Bison Hill, and it's so thin here that you can actually shine light through it, very much like the OG thin vase. So, the complexity of the shape here is not there. You don't have handles. You don't have a hollowed out interior in the same way. So this is a bit more simple design, but hey, he's getting down to the thinness and he's getting down to the precision. So this is a pretty good comparison for these pre-dynastic vases. And let's see how precise this one got. That is really impressive. That is really impressive. I want to point out this is done on the same lathe with the same tools as the last shot glass. So that first shot glass is not an indication of the peak of the ability of this tool, right? It's just, even that first shot glass being less precise than this one and the next one that I'm about to show, which gets even more precise. That's because the shot glass was already taken to perfection, right? As far as the eye can tell, as far as fingers and touch can tell, all three of these shot glasses are perfect. But he continues, he flexes his artistic ability, sees just how good he can get it, and we end up with his third shot glass. There we go. Which does end up being really, really, really precise. So they've just divided by 10 again to be able to get, a heat map that again looks like what we see in the vases. So this is about 10 times as precise as what we've seen from these pre-dynastic vases so far. It's really, really precise. And I find it interesting that, again, all of these were made on the same machine with the same tools. So, you go back to like Dan's argument of, well, why didn't they make these more precise? Why didn't they polish them to a greater degree? And I would argue that it's for the exact same reason that we don't do that today. You look at the granite urns that are actually mass produced, that are industrialized, and they take them to perfection. As far as the eye can tell, as far as the hand can tell, they're perfect. Are they actually perfect? No, but they don't need to be any more perfect than that. These aren't one-off art pieces where an artist is flexing his ability. These are just items that need to be good enough. And a few thousandths of an inch is good enough. And so we see the exact same thing in the pre-dynastic vases. I allege that this is an industrialized process. There's tens of thousands at least, likely hundreds of thousands of these vases that existed, originally. And there's no decoration on any of them. I mean, yes, some of them have later kings' names written onto them, but like there's no decoration on any of them. They're very plain, and they're not functional. They're vases. They're functional as vases, right? But they're not like moving part. They're not part of a machine. So there truly is no reason to take them beyond the level that they were taken. They're within the range of perfect. And I want to highlight this for a second. The whole conversation around the vases has become so incredibly mutilated because of people like Night Scarab, who deliberately makes propaganda targeting low information, low IQ viewers. It looks good and it sounds good and it's just full of bullshit. And so this creates an army of useful idiots. So anytime these vases are brought up online, you have all of these useful idiots coming out of the woodwork going, oh, you're retarded, you're stupid, you know, blah, 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 right? And it's really, really easy to get dragged down into those arguments. I've done it 3 times already with Night Scarab. I almost did it a 4th time. But it really isn't productive. You can't win an argument against stupid. You can only be dragged down to their level. So unfortunately, Night Scarab's videos are like successful in that avenue. But yeah, the whole conversation has been reframed so that we've gotten to the absolutely insane point where we are comparing our theoretical production. Because when we compare our actual production, the pre-dynastic vases are better. So we have to compare our theoretical production. What could we as a space age civilization do if humanity came together for the common goal of creating a pre-dynastic vase? It's like, yeah, we could do better. We don't, but we could. Or you have artists who are flexing their artistic mastery who can do something better, like Bison Hill Stonecrafts. And I'm hesitant to even call that better because it is a more simplistic design. It's not as complicated as the vases. So it's more precise. Is it better? I'm not sure. It's definitely more precise. But we are comparing these theoretical peaks of our space age civilization to the actual production ability of an industrialized, mass-produced process 6,500 years ago. We're looking at, as I just showed, the same lathe can turn out 3 different pieces of 3 pretty different quality levels. And so we're looking at mass-produced pieces from 6,500 years ago and assuming that this is their absolute peak of ability. There's no indication that it is. These aren't like the crystal ewers, which clearly are a flex of artistic mastery. Again, these are mass-produced. There's no indication that this is a flex of artistic mastery whatsoever. So we're comparing a proto-civilization's mass-produced vessels of something that's non-functioning, that is just a vase, to our theoretical production peak as a space-age civilization. The whole conversation has been absolutely bastardized. But let's keep taking a look at what else he has to show. So these are the pre-dynastic vases, and we see some really interesting things here, particularly in this vase on the left, or sorry, these 2 vases on the left, and particularly this one. There's very strange banding patterns, and I think this might rotate if I play it, so I'm gonna, it does not. Okay. The bands go almost all the way around, but you can see that they're sort of wedge shaped. I don't know what this means. Like when we looked at the granite urns and we see that wobble, it's like, okay, that's just a wobble on the rotation axis. I'm not a lathe master. I would love to get the opinion of someone who like calibrates lathes. The guy whose job it is all day, every day to go in, look at a lathe that's doing something funky, that's having a weird wear pattern, and his job is to calibrate it. I'm willing to bet they could take one look at this and tell you exactly what's going on. I have no idea though. And I haven't heard anyone weigh in on what these banding patterns mean. It clearly means something for the production. I mean, you have these bands over here as well. They seem a little bit more uniform going around, but there's a few vases where they have these wedge-shaped band patterns, these alternating wedges. That's very strange to me. I have no idea what it means. I'm pretty confident it's a big clue into how these were produced. And it sure seems to be indicative of rotation, but I don't actually know what it means. And you can see that there's this banding on multiple. That's the same vase as before, same vase as before. This is the beehive vase. The banding's a little bit different here, but it has banding. So that's all for the Night Scarab video, but there is some recent analysis that's been done that shows some interesting things. Sorry, my computer's, there we go. It was refusing to close something. So we see the banding on some of these pre-dynastic vases, but we also see, am I showing you guys the screen? I'm not. There we go. We also see some other interesting things. So this here on the left is a pre-dynastic vase, and the scan quality is not that great, but you can kind of see that it's pretty decent here. We have in hundredths of an inch being measured roughly. And this is the only modern vase that I'm aware of that has been produced. This was produced by Matt Bell on a 5-axis CNC machine, and you can see that it's not all that precise. We're dealing with a whole another decimal point here, and it's got all kinds of high and low patches. This was a 5-axis CNC machine that this was produced on here. So this is, to my knowledge, the only modern replica of one of these pre-dynastic vases that exists. And on this other pre-dynastic vase here, there's no banding. Is there even an indication of rotation? Maybe the scan quality is too low here, but it's interesting to see that there is no banding apparent on this vase. Just some more vases here. That beehive vase again. Again, I don't really see banding on these other 3 vases. They're pretty darn precise. They're pretty smooth. They're pretty uniform. This one in particular, but no banding. So is that indicative of a different method of production? Are there multiple? I think there are multiple methods of production, but I think there might even be more than 2, because I'm going to show you a clear, there are clearly handmade vases from pre-dynastic Egypt. In fact, I think I'll highlight that now. So Matt Bell, and I don't know if he's the one who made this, but he's who I saw shared it, this analysis with all of these vases. So these are all pre-dynastic vases here that were all scanned and analyzed. These are 3 modern vases, okay, that were also scanned and analyzed. And these are the 2 vases from Scientists Against Myths. This is their first attempt, and this is their second attempt, where they made it by hand, but they also used rotation and a Sharpie to mark high spots, and then by hand lowered those high spots. So there was rotation involved in this one. And here is the data on all of those vases, right? So they did some complicated stuff. They measured a lot of different variables and combined all of those variables together to get an overall precision score. So it's looking at things like how centered is the core, how cylindrical is the outside, how cylindrical is the inside, how consistent is the wall thickness, many, many, many different factors here. And pay attention to these numbers on the side. This is not a direct scale. We've got 1 to 5 here, double the space of 50 to 100, right? So keep that in mind here. But they've separated these things into 2 distinct classes, the imprecise or handmade and the precise class. The 3 modern vessels that are turned on lathes, those fall into the precise class. And we can see they're very comparable to the pre-dynastic vases, which is what I've been saying the whole time, and that the pre-dynastic vases are actually a little bit more impressive than them, which is what I've been saying the whole time. Vase 18 is the most impressive. So, just to give you guys an idea of what we're dealing with here, this is Vase 18 down in the bottom left-hand corner. Some of the other more impressive ones were S1 and S7. Even the less impressive ones here, I mean, V22 is obviously a little wonky here, but even the less impressive ones like V8 is one of the worst ones. Doesn't even look that bad. This is a pretty impressively handmade vase here. And on some of the heat maps here, let's see if I can pull up, because there's pretty clear examples of some of these vases are not rotationally made. They are handmade. Let's see if I can find in this report what I'm looking for. Right here, right? So there's no signs of rotation here. And you actually have like vertical striations going on this thing. Let me double check real quick that I'm looking at the right thing. Yes, so this is actually the pre-dynastic vase. This one is pre-dynastic because we're going to compare that CNC made vase here in a second. But this is pre-dynastic, and it doesn't seem to, again, those seem to be vertical striations to me. Certainly not horizontal banding. To me, this does not look like something that was rotated on a lathe. And it's not as precise as the rotational ones. And I unfortunately can't directly compare it back to this chart because this is a different set of vases. This is a different set of analysis. So it doesn't appear on here. I would like to place this on that chart. I don't know where this would place on that chart. But in the imprecise category, I do believe. And I linked all of these analysis down in my description. So if you want to take a deeper look at these things, you can. Which vase is this one? This is the CNC made vase, right? This was made by a 5-axis CNC machine, straight drill hole here. So this is modern. And there are some interesting things in that data up above, but I want to get down to the heat map again, if I can find it. If I can find it. A lot of pages to scroll through here. My apologies. Here we go. Okay. So the scales aren't even the same on these. If we come back, to here, this is 0.2 millimeters, and this is 0.3 millimeters. So the scale changes slightly. And you can see that this CNC created vase is less precise than the dynastic one. And since this is a 5-axis CNC machine, it also makes sense that you're not seeing the rotational because this was created with a 5-axis CNC machine instead of on a lathe. So yeah. But less precise. It's less precise than that seemingly non-rotationally created pre-dynastic vase. So the argument from Night Scarab and Dan that they like to make repeatedly going, CNC's just out, I would love to know what they mean by that. Because it seems like they mean that CNC is out because the vases aren't precise enough. But in reality, if anything, CNC is out because the vases are too precise to be produced by one of those. And then this is, again, a pre-dynastic vase. And there's some indication of banding here. Pretty light indication. It's more just patchy to me. And we're seeing the scale change again. This is 0.1 millimeters. So, 3 times as precise as that CNC machine created one. Here's the interior. The interior is also surprisingly precise. It's the same scale as on the exterior, 0.1 millimeters. Again, that's a very clean interior on this vase. Let's see. Here's another look. So somewhere in here, I have a vase that is, maybe I don't. I thought I did have a vase pulled up. I might have lost it amongst all of my tabs. There are some scans showing, similarly to what we saw in the CNC vase and that other globular vase, where it's very clearly not horizontal banding and it's clearly handmade. It's just much more patchy and, similar to that first vase that was shown on the Night Scarab video. I don't have the heat maps pulled up. Unfortunately, I thought I did. But yeah, there is clearly, as is shown in the analysis by Matt Bell here, there's 2 different groups. And I think this group are handmade vessels, and some of them could be lower quality rotationally made vessels. I wouldn't be surprised if we found some banding in some of these. but there do seem to be two clear, distinct groups. And this seems to fit with the idea that Ben proposes and that I'm increasingly getting behind, which is that the pre-dynastic Egyptians found a stash of these vases, just like we did under Djoser's pyramid. And this proto-civilization finds these remarkable artifacts. And at first they're, joyous and they spread them around and everyone's got them. And then realization sets in. Someone made these. We can make these. I don't think it even occurred to them that something like this was even possible until they found these vases. And then they realize it is possible. And they start trying to make them themselves. And they did a remarkably good job, considering they don't have rotational tools like lathes or even potter's wheels. Recreating these vases by hand, they, did some remarkable work. Some of these vases here, right? Even the less precise ones like V10, like V8 and V22, those are still impressive vases. V12, those are still impressive vases. So I think that's exactly what you see here is these people finding these vases, being inspired by them, recreating them. And I think it had a non-insignificant impact on the development of their civilization as well. You certainly had, leaders and things before this, but there was no centralized power before these vases. These vases appear in mass-produced numbers before any centralized powers appear. And then shortly after the vases appear, you have kings and eventually dynastic Egypt evolving. But I think that came about because wealth and stratification came about because the people with the vases end up having the power, end up having the influence. And so I think these vases quite possibly are responsible for the dynastic Egypt that we see today. They realize that the vases are possible. They recreate those. And then eventually they go, hey, if we can make these vases, what else can we do in stone? And you have the magnificence that becomes dynastic Egypt. There is a lot of information in these reports. And there's multiple different people doing the analysis. So I'm sure there's even more information out there that I haven't seen. And more is coming. Here's the beehive. Really interesting stuff. These things they've started scanning the interiors as well. Here you have a thickness analysis. Pretty remarkably consistent thickness. Very, very interesting stuff here. I did want to highlight just the comparison on some of these vases. Here we go. This is what I'm looking for. So this is a pre-dynastic vase here, one of the more impressive ones. This is its precision score using only the exterior. So they did their own analysis. This is separate from Matt Bell's analysis here. They are using their own system, okay? But they did a similar thing where the closer to zero, the more perfect it is. So in order to get this score, what they did is they inversed that and then they squared it. The reason for squaring it is because every progressive level of precision takes more and more effort. It is a logarithmic curve. And so this is meant to reflect that. So they inverse the score as it approaches zero, and then they square it. And so the higher this number, the more precise it is. But, 621 to 1905, this isn't 3 times as precise as in, you can't move the decimal over 3 times. It's a logarithmic scale, if that makes any sense. But here we have one of those vessels, one of the pre-dynastic vessels compared to the dark gray bag vessel that we had, and then comparing it to some pottery and comparing it to an Egyptian calcite vase, which I want to zoom in on a little bit just to give you an idea. That calcite vase really does not look that bad. I mean, perfect, no, but that's a decent looking vase there. And then let's see how it scores. 1.12 compared to 621 and 1905. So, I mean, these are some very, very impressive vessels that we're dealing with. And here, another comparison real quick. Same thing, just with the addition of the CNC 5-axis CNC machine vase, the modern one. It's got a score of 84. So I thought that was interesting. Let's see. I'm not showing it. Fuck me. I was showing this. This is what I was showing. And as I was explaining this score here, they're using just the exterior as the score. The interior on all of these is less impressive, but they're measuring how precise is the outside. And these are the inversed squared scores that you get. And this is that. Let me zoom back in on that calcite vase to give you guys an idea. Really doesn't look bad. Really doesn't look bad. And it gets a score of 1.12. So let's see. What do you guys... Is it symmetrical? Yeah, the vases are pretty symmetrical. The stupid heart is in the way. But yeah, I wish I had the heat map of the clearly handmade vessel that was scanned pulled up. I had it pulled up earlier. I don't know what happened to it. Maybe it's this. Let me take a look at this video real quick. It's not this, but we'll take a look at this. This is yet another heat map of another granite vase. You know, these are 0.2 millimeters. So this one is not nearly as precise as the others. You can see there's a couple extra decimals here, although it's not really reaching those levels either. So anyways, the vases, it would seem that there is amongst, and there's a clear separation between the precise and imprecise class. What's less clear to me is the production methods. We're seeing banding on some, we're not seeing banding on others. You know, on the handmade ones, you can tell they're handmade. And so this analysis is going to be great. It will be able to separate handmade from rotationally made vases, at least with some reasonable level of certainty. And I think we'll also get some insights into how these things were actually made. And it looks like there might be multiple different production methods, which is really, really interesting, especially if there's multiple different production methods in the very precise vases. I don't know how to analyze these wear patterns. I don't know how to look at that banding and tell you what it means. I'm really hoping that someone does. We get someone who calibrates lathes for a living to weigh in on this. But yeah, the vases, as always, are very impressive. It's obvious to me that there's clearly a non-handmade category. There's clearly a category that was rotational. Why do we see that technology for these vases and exclusively for these vases and in nothing else for thousands of years in Egypt? We don't even see the potter's wheel for like another 2,000 years. How do you explain that without these being inherited? I'm really excited for Ben's trip to the Boston Museum. He's taking a trip to the Boston Museum where they have the artifacts from these digs from Toshka from 14 to 15,000 years ago, where these Toshka burials are dating back to 14, 15,000 years ago. And they have the artifacts from those digs in the museum. Because there's not a ton of great information about those artifacts available. Ben believes that the vessels that are seen in those photographs are stone vessels. He believes they are these precise stone vessels that we're finding in pre-dynastic Egypt. I'm not sure. The mainstream goes, no, those are pottery. But Ben is going to take a trip to the museum and he's going to look for them and he's going to see if he can find these vessels and determine if they're stone or pottery. And if they're stone, that would again be like as big of a revelation as was the initial precision reveal of these vases. If there's precision vases or even stone vases going back 15,000 years to what is very clearly a Stone Age people, pre-dynastic Egypt is kind of the transitionary phase from Stone Age to like full-on civilization. But 15,000 years ago, they're full-on Stone Age, fully Stone Age. So if we're finding these then, that solidifies this idea of inheritance. That would be absolute proof in my mind of truly an advanced civilization existing and fully being erased and lost in our distant past. So I'm really, really excited about what's going to come of these vases. More and more people are working on the analysis. More and more people are getting involved with the scanning. There's at least 3 different groups involved in scanning now, maybe more. And like this guy here, right, Marion Marcy, from my understanding, this is just a dude who isn't even like directly involved with these people. He's just taking the STL files and he is producing, taking the STL files and making them something that we can actually understand and see and visualize, which is great. So there's more work being done. As you can see on this web page here, they've only done these first 3 vases that I showed you, but these are a totally different category of vases. None of these vases are these vases, right? So this is Matt Bell's collection and some other collections mixed in as well. This is a totally separate set of vases here, and they are working on getting the reports out for all of these. That's 2 groups. Like I said, I think there's a 3rd group with Karoli Polka. So I'm really excited to see what these vases hold. I think they're rewriting history, and depending on what Ben finds in the Boston Museum, it could really, really rewrite history. So that's what I've got to present for today. I'm a little light just because I was preparing to do a response video tonight, Scarab, and then I changed my mind. So yeah, it is really tempting. It is really easy to get dragged into those arguments with stupid people. And I need to take my own advice and not do that. It's not productive. So real quick, before I peace out, I guess I'll give a little update into like things I'm doing and just things that are developing in this space. A while ago, I was talking about how people need to come together and consolidate their efforts and stop being just individuals looking into these things. And I was definitely behind the ball. That is absolutely happening. There's multiple people working towards that. There's multiple groups forming and have already formed. There is multiple projects for LiDAR scans in South America. A while ago, I posted a crowdfunding link on my X. If you scroll back far enough, you might be able to find it. But yeah, there's people that are crowdfunding LiDAR scans in South America. They've already done some. They're trying to expand it and do it larger. They have found civilizations exactly as I would expect to find them. The whole continent was civilized. The whole continent had the mainstream understanding of South America is so far behind the ball. I think a lot of alternate people are already like fully aware of the fact that, the Mayans, the Aztecs, these people were doing really, really big things. They had dominated their land. They had completely developed all of South America. And it just got swallowed up by the jungle. And we don't see it anymore because it's swallowed by the jungle. And we can't access it. Like the areas that these people are working on LiDAR scanning, they're like deep in the middle of the jungle. So it's just the scans. They can't really go and investigate these things. They can't even go and investigate these things with drones because it's like over 50 miles from the nearest access point, right? But the message here is that a lot is going on. A lot is going on in the alternate community. People are moving the ball in the direction that it needs to be moved. I am very glad that I was behind the curve on that. So much more is happening than I thought there was. So 2025, it's going to be a really good year. I'm really looking forward to it. I've got some projects in the background as well. So 2025 is going to be a really good year. Thanks for tuning in, fellas, and I'll catch you next week.